Hello, everyone. I'm Derek Lee, PM for Azure Logic Apps. Thanks for tuning in to the October edition of Logic Hub Live, where we talk about new features and upcoming features. We look at some cool demos, and we answer your questions live towards the end of the show. But before we get started, we actually have some new faces here today with us on the call. So let's start with a quick round of introduction. Why don't we start with you, Xiaowei? Cool. Thanks, Xiaowei. And for those of you who don't know, Xiaowei is the designer behind all the Logic App Refresh. So great work, and we'll hear more about it later today. And then, oh, I have some issues here, looks like, with my stream setup. So let me try to fix that. All right, let's do this view. Beck, why don't we go to you for a quick intro? All right, cool. Welcome back. And as usual, we have other folks that you are probably already familiar. We have John and Valerie on camera. And also we have Divya and Chris also on the call to answer your questions if you have any. So make sure you post your questions to the chat and we'll get to it towards later in the show. But let's get started with the deck. We'll do this one. I think that's yours, John.
They can't hear John.
Can't hear you. Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. Let's give that another try. How about now?
Can you hear me now?
They can't hear John.
Can't hear you. Yeah.
All right.
How about now? It's all silence.
Looks like yes.
Yes. Now they can hear.
Okay. All right. Let's pretend that didn't happen. Hey, everybody. So we had a pretty big release last month. Hopefully some of you are aware of this, but if you're not, I'm going to quickly rattle through the new capabilities. So we shipped a new Logic Apps runtime. So we containerized the engine and made it possible to run on top of Azure Functions and with Azure Functions. Also run and kind of deploy as part of App Service. So you really kind of get this great better together experience, as well as a ton of consistency in terms of how you can build workflow applications and integration solutions. We have a new workflow designer as well. We're going to get into a lot more detail on that in a moment because it's really cool and we have more cool stuff coming. The next thing we released was something called API Connections as a Service, which is taking the connectors that we have available on Logic Apps and make them available for Azure Functions as well. Again, kind of talking to that better together and really making a seamless experience of how you build modern cloud native apps. And the final thing we shipped, which is also pretty interesting, is automation task, which is the ability to be able to go into the Azure portal and against any resource that you have, actually create automation kind of actions against that. So, for example, you could start and stop a VM on a schedule, and we provide out-of-the-box templates, and we're adding to the list of templates a list of resources that we support. So it's super easy now to be able to kind of click, 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 go through and automate some action against a resource. Maybe you want to clean up some blob storage or something else. We've made that really easy. And what we've made even easier is actually using Logic Apps, because it's powered by Logic Apps behind the scenes, so that you can actually open those up once they've been created for you, just through that initial wizard process, and go and extend and enhance them to your heart's content. And then, what's new? So what have we been doing since then, I guess, in the last month or so, and since we last spoke? We now have the ability to create the logic apps preview from the portal. So if you've been trying out the bits, you'll know that you had to do that from Visual Studio Code. So we're introducing a way of being able to essentially do that and create the logic apps from the Azure portal as well to make that much easier to do, to kind of set things up there, and then you can go to VS Code and actually author the workflows, or you can go to the portal and do that. And following on from that is the new monitoring view. So taking the same look and feel of the new designer, and when you open up the run history and click on a logic app that's running or already completed, you can see the same layout, the same experience as you get with the new designer in monitoring view. And then the final thing is the Bissell Migrator, which we released this week. So just a couple of days ago, we opened up the GitHub repos. This has been a pretty big project for us. We've been running this for nearly a year, building out the ability to take Bissell applications and convert them to the equivalents in Azure Integration Services, which of course includes Logic Apps, Service Bus, and a bunch of other things as well. So essentially doing a re-architecture of your Bissell applications through the tool, which generates a report and then spits out ARM templates, which you can then deploy to create the equivalent applications in Azure. And we're going to talk about that a bit later as well.
All right, thanks, John. So let's transition to the demo portion of the webcast. We'll start with the new workflow designer. Now, I have showed some of that earlier in the last live stream, but I want to let you hear from the designer who is behind all these awesome UI and UX experiences, understand why we made certain decisions, why we choose to do what we do, and at the same time, we also have some new features on the monitoring view that I think you will like. So with that said, let's go to Xiaowei for the first demo.
Thank you, Derek, for the introduction. Hi, I'm Xiaowei, and I'm really happy to be here to share some of the features that are currently available in public preview now. So here I have a workflow that's a request and response workflow. And then I want to talk about a little bit about this designer refresh. So we've heard from you that one of the problems with the previous Logic App Designer is that it is a little bit hard to interact with once the workflow gets to be more complex. So with this refresh, we're hoping to improve the experience in that scenario. And we also want to bring as many usability improvements as possible. So let's take a look at here. So I have like much smaller cars than before. And then if I click on this trigger, I have this panel shows up for me to configure everything related to this trigger. And also, you may notice that some information and configuration that were previously accessible from the dropdown behind this ellipsis are now pivots. So by bringing this information up in front, we are hoping to increase the visibility of them and also have them like easier to access. And then if we look at the next action here, you may notice that there's this icon that the other actions don't have, and that is a connection indicator. So I had to provide a connection for this connector, and this is the connection I provided. So before going to this card, I know that this card is different from the others. And then let's go to this card. So one other thing that I learned from you is that renaming actions is really common. And we also heard that the previous designer it wasn't really that easy to do that. So I want to make that easier. So today in the new designer, if you want to rename this action, you can just go over to the title here and say if I want to rename it. And the moment I click out of the focus, and then the name is updated in my panel here and also on the card. And then if we want to provide more information for us to better understand the workflow or leave some notes for our coworkers, we can all now add a comment here. So similar, say if I just want to say updated updates needed here. And the moment I click out of it, it stays there. And also there is this icon shows up in the card. If I hover over this, I can see the exact comments I left for myself. And then if the next time I come back to this workflow, those will be there. And then without going to each one of the actions, I can learn like my notes, and I can learn like what's the connector there. And then for the connector, we heard that sometimes you have different connections for the same connector in one workflow. So we're hoping with this interaction that we can make that differentiation easier. So that this is the editing view. And then so we created this workflow before the demo. So we have something to monitor. And if you go to the monitor here, and then you can see this view. So I'm going to use a different type because of the loading time. So here I have all the runs, and let's take a look at one of them. So now we have the monitor view having the same layout as the editing view. And then the addition to that, we have this status and a duration on the top right of each one of my cards. So I'm not going to show all the status here today, but we've done some work to make them more communicative of what they are. And then if we take a look at the duration, we are now also providing more details about the duration. If the duration is less than a second, we now can say it's 0.1 second here. And if it's more than a minute, we now can say it's 1 minute and 30 seconds, for example. If we want to go and check out the inputs and outputs of my actions here, I can just click the cards and then see the inputs and output from the panel. So imagine if we have a more complex workflow here on the left. Having this side by side, I can easily spot the action that I want to investigate and then go directly to that action with less scrolling in this new designer. So I have another workflow that I want to show here. So this is a much complex workflow. You can see we have like condition, we have switch, we have a nested condition inside the switch. This is what I see when I come to this workflow. So instead of previously, I need to click to review the workflow for me. The workflow is there. Now I can see all the structures, all the actions right here. So I can get an estimate of how complex this workflow is, and then start to understand what this workflow is talking about. And if I want my workflow to look cleaner, I can also just collapse the area I don't need to focus on right now. If I want to interact with one of the actions, I can just click here. So you can see I can still see most of my workflows here. So I know where this action is in my workflow and what are the actions before and after this action. And if I want to edit another action with minimum scrolling, I can just click to edit other actions here. So this, this is a scenario that we want to improve on. And then I want to mention that we are still working on bringing more improvements both on the workflow layout and the panel. I also want to thank you for providing feedback for us and also participate in the user studies we had in the past few months. We are planning more studies, and then if you're interested to provide more feedback on the designer, and or if you're interested to know like what we are working on right now, you can follow Logic App on Twitter to learn how to participate in those upcoming studies. Thank you. So that I will hand it back to Derek.
All right, thanks, Xiaowei. This is great. Again, thank you for providing all the feedback, everyone. And please keep trying this and let us know what area that you want us to work on. Now, let's talk about the BizTalk Migrator, and I think that is your section, Beck.
It sure is. And for the folks who didn't hear my introduction, hey everyone, I'm stoked to be joining the team as a new PM. A bit of background on me, I spent the last 4 years helping customers across Australia modernize their integration stacks onto Azure Integration Services. Quick sanity check, can everyone hear me okay? And are the slides showing as well? I'll take silence as a yes. So two of the most common questions I've been asked in the field is, what does BizTalk functionality look like on Azure Integration Services, and how do I get there? Well, let's start with question one and map out what current BizTalk functionality will look like on Azure Integration Services. So if we distill down BizTalk functionality, so to the left-hand side, essentially what BizTalk does in a nutshell is exposes and composes our various endpoints. It houses our schemas, maps, and orchestrates our business critical workflows. It provides enterprise service bus pub sub functionality, and of course, custom development for extensibility. Azure Integration Services on the right-hand side are a set of integration-specific technologies that satisfy core requirements for modern integration, and together make up Microsoft's suite of integration platform services. Now, if we think about these services in the lens of BizTalk, this is how the functionality roughly maps across. Your XML and SOAP-based endpoints can move across to be exposed by APIM and enriched by the in-depth policy and transformation engine, allowing you to maintain your investment in your current integration points. Schemas, maps, B2B workflows all go across into logic apps and integration accounts. Your pub sub functionality is modernized and simplified with Event Grid and Service Bus for your traditional messaging patterns, and Event Grid for your lighter weight real-time application development. And of course, custom dev can be refactored to move across into service Azure functions. Now, each of these Azure services can be individually deployed and scaled, giving you a lot of flexibility, plus with the single pane of glass management that you'd need for enterprise breadth integrations, so with Azure Monitor and Security Center, as well as the ancillary pieces of Azure to help bolster your integrations like Key Vault and all the data services that are available. Okay, so that is A and B. How do we get from A to B? And this is where the migration toolkit comes in. So if we click over to the next slide, we'll be able to see that in a nutshell, the BizTalk Migrator is a command line interface tool for migrating BizTalk assets to Azure. It's an open source project run by Microsoft, delivered for the benefit of you guys, the BizTalk and the Azure customers. And if you run everything above BizTalk 2013 and onwards, you're in luck, and you can run the tool today, and you can find more details on how to run this through the repo linked here. It's just up on GitHub. So if we go to the next slide, we'll be able to see a bit of an overview of what the tool can do. Now, while it doesn't cover every single piece of BizTalk functionality, it uses a plugin architecture to allow new functionality and features to be added. So the tool can be extended to cover additional migration scenarios in the future. It's all open source, so please jump in and have a go. I won't go through all these right now for timing's sake, but for the most up-to-date view on what it can and can't do, check out the repo link there for our frequently asked questions and for documentation. So if we go onto the next slide here, and if we take a look under the covers, this is what the tool does from a high level. In the discover phase, the BizTalk Migrator scans your BizTalk MSI and identifies the BizTalk artifacts that need to be converted. In the pass phase, the BizTalk Migrator reads and decodes the BizTalk components and builds a data model of the application. In the analyze phase, it actually compares that old data model and creates a new mapping of what that will look like in Azure Integration Services. The report phase will generate a report of the information generated so far, giving you information that you might need to know, such as this is what can be converted and this is what can't. And the verify stage is where you'll run all the install scripts to actually deploy the application in Azure. I missed a phase. Convert up there actually generates all the ARM templates and the PowerShell deploy scripts, which was what will actually create the application in Azure. Now, a picture paints 1,000 words, but a demo paints a million more. So I'm going to pass over to Valerie, who's actually going to show you the tool running. Over to you, Valerie.
This is a demo of the Scenario 1 FTP pass-through sample from the documentation. I'm running the tool to migrate using region South Central US and a deployment ID of VR280. The tool runs very quickly, going through the discover, parse, analyze, report, and convert phases. It creates a unique folder that contains the HTML files that have the report, and a conversion folder that contains the Azure deployment scripts, including a deploy all PowerShell script. The HTML report shows summary run information along with the details of BizTalk applications that were processed and the Azure components that were created. We go into the FTP pass-through application and it shows it was 97.5% successful in the conversion. If we look at the FTP receive location, we see it shows 4 stars out of 5. Scrolling down, there are warning messages about properties that were in BizTalk, but not available in the Azure FTP connector. Notably, the delete after download with a value of true, so files will remain on the FTP server unless a change is made to the Logic app. Next, I will deploy to Azure. So I'm logging into the Azure CLI here and getting into my account up in Azure. Then I'll go into PowerShell. And in the conversion folder, I run the deploy all script. Note, it is going to go to the South Central US. You'll see that in the notes here as it goes down through the subscription. We also notice that it's using that unique deployment ID of VR280. Now this is going to take a while to run, and it took about an hour for this to go all the way through. An hour has passed and the run is now complete. At this point, I can go look at my subscription in the Azure portal to see exactly what was created. I have 34 resources that have shown up there, a bunch of Logic apps, some API connections, and as well as some function apps, an integration account, and Key Vault, all with names ending with the deployment ID of VR280 to help make it easier to find the items that were generated. Everything starts with the FTP receive location Logic app. So that is where I will go first. I go in and I edit it in the Logic Apps Designer and see that I have connection problems. Well, that's because the scripts did not contain my correct FTP configuration. So I'm going to need to go fix that and into the API connections and change the receive connector to edit it and put in the correct FTP information. I also had to do that for the FTP send port, but I don't show that on this video. Here I'm putting in the information on the receive connector, get my correct server address. Once I get back to the Logic apps, I can take a look at my trigger history and I can see that where it used to say failed because it had the incorrect FTP information, now it's skipped, and that's because there is no file in the receive folder. At this point, I go back to my FTP server and I have my receive and my send folders there. I'll copy a sample file over to the receive folder, come back to my Logic app and take a look, and we've got a running instance of it now. I can go into that instance and take a look at the steps as they're running. And then note that in the background on the FTP server, a file has appeared in my send folder. And when I refresh on the Logic app, it showed that the run had succeeded. Over on the FTP server, I can take a look at the file that got created, and it's just a copy of the same file that I had put into the receive folder.
All right. Thanks for the demo, Valerie. And let's talk about what's coming up soon. John, go ahead.
Running on a Mac, you'll be able to be able to use the VS Code extension with support from us to be able to do development on your Apple Mac. I know that's something that our own team is excited about. So hopefully, if you use a Mac, then you are as well. The next one is more designer improvements. We have a number of things kind of coming in this space that's going to just add more and more capabilities to Designer. You know, we shipped monitoring view a couple of weeks ago, and there's more goodness coming down the pipe. MSI for OAuth is something that's actually just gone out, right? I think, guys. So that's a new capability that, again, a lot of people have been asking for. It's actually been one of the pain points that we've received a ton of feedback on. So the ability to use MSI for OAuth connections is now available. And then a little reveal in terms of what's coming next time in about a month or so is a refresh of the public preview. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually add some new capabilities and ship an update to the bits that we shipped at Ignite. Some things that didn't quite make it, as well as the incremental stuff that obviously we've been doing all along. But one of the first things, and we'll talk about this in the next Logic Apps live. So don't worry, we'll actually show this next time. The first thing, which is pretty interesting though, is a new connector SDK. So again, for those of you who played around with the preview, you'll know that there are some connectors that are now kind of built into the engine, things like event hubs, and we've done that for much more scale, removing any of the limits and being able to get higher throughput. And soon you'll be able to build built-in connectors yourself. So you'll be able to extend the Logic Apps engine with your own connectors using our SDK and writing code in VS Code or Visual Studio to be able to do that, and they'll just show up in the Designer, just like the out-of-the-box ones that we provide are. The next one is App Insights. This is, it's not like we don't have App Insights support today, we do, but we're going to be making that better because some things around kind of the way events are correlated in App Insights aren't as great as we want them to be. So we'll be adding some improvements there to make that work great so that you can kind of trace through calls between different services with Logic Apps in the middle better than you can do today. And the next one is integration account actions. So we've heard from a lot of people that people want mapping support kind of, again, built into the engine, the ability to be able to do it without an integration account. So that is something else we are working on. And again, we'll talk about this next time. So a little sneak peek in terms of what's coming for XML and Liquid template mapping. And the final one is webhook triggers and actions, which is something that's missing right now that we'll be adding in the preview refresh as well.
All right.
So, do you want to take this away, Derek?
I think that's Divya's section. So Divya, why don't you go ahead?
Sure, Derek. Hey, everyone. So yeah, you've heard a lot of work that has happened, a lot of work that we are doing. Preview refresh will be coming in soon. And all of this is happening due to the feedback we get from you. This is very important, so keep that coming. And there are various ways to get involved, to engage with us. And we have information here available for you. Please use these links to stay connected with us, provide your inputs on the work we are doing, on the things that you would want us to work on, what are important for you. We also released API connection private preview that we shared in our last webcast, and we showed how it works and everything. So we asked you to sign up for it. Hopefully you have a lot of you here have already signed up for it and probably got a chance to play with it as well. So in the next couple of weeks, I am going to reach out to you to seek for some direct feedback, as well as what are the things you would like there. Does it make sense? What kind of business applications you plan to build using these capabilities. So stay tuned and again, stay engaged and connected with us. And we really appreciate all the feedback, all the inputs we get from you. And lastly, on BizTalk Migrator, we provided you a sneak peek into what we've done here. But next week, we want to have a deeper dive, an hour-long session to go into the nitty-gritty details of what we have done. This is all open source, so we want to share with you the repo and answer more specific questions on the BizTalk Migrator next week. So please stay tuned and please join us again next week. And as I mentioned, yeah, once again, thank you so much for all the feedback that you have provided us. Please keep that coming as we build new features and new capabilities for you. We really appreciate it. And do try out the new features that we are building and keep the feedback coming. Yeah, thank you. Over to you, Derek.
All right, thanks, Divya. Now we are on the last portion of the live stream where we answer your questions live. So let's take a look at the chat window and please feel free, people on the call, to pick up any questions that you can answer.
I'll answer the one on mapping XLT and liquid templates, being able to do them in VS Code. As I just put in the chat, there is some limited support today from third parties to do liquid template. There's an extension for that which provides syntax colorization and checking. I think the ask is probably around, can we have a graphical mapper like we do in full Visual Studio in VS Code? There's a number of technical complexities associated with that. It is a totally valid ask, but I think that will continue to live in Visual Studio. We're actually working on upgrading the abilities to be able to do that in the latest version of Visual Studio as well, and we'll be doing that next. And then I think when we look into next year, we can look and see what other mapping investments we can make there.
Cool. There's a question on how can I try out the new designer? Well, you have a couple of ways. You can download our new Visual Studio Code extension so that you can use the designer and develop and debug it locally without having to connect to Azure. Or alternatively, we just turn on the ability for you to create a new Logic app with the new function runtime through Azure Portal. So you can start doing that today and give it a try for the new designer in the portal like Xiaowei have showed you.
Good spot from Mikhail Sand in terms of what my background is. Yes, it is Stay on a Spring. You may be asking why it's my background. It's because I did the port to the Commodore 16 and +4 back in the day. If that means anything to you.
We have a question on whether it's possible to create a custom connector to interact with on-prem AD via on-prem data gateway. Custom connector does give you the ability to go through on-prem data gateway. So as long as there is an API, a RESTful API that's exposed by the service you want to call, you should be able to do that. But other than using custom connectors and custom gateway, what I would also encourage you to try is the new Logic App runtime that will allow you to actually run Logic App on-prem, so you don't need the on-prem data gateway to talk to those services in the first place.
So a question about when we're going to be GAing the new runtime and the new capabilities. That's something we're super conscious of and want to get to as quickly as we can. So the short answer is when it's ready, and you'll tell us when it's ready. But what the hope is that it'll be late Q1 next year is what we're aiming for. But it's like all these things, like the software, will declare GA when we feel, and you tell us that the quality bar has been met, because we, like you, we want to see this GA as soon as we can.
We have one from Justin. Is there a way to lock editing in Portal if we enable DevOps pipeline, for example, dev in Visual Studio Code and develop via DevOps? The answer is yes, that feature is coming. So we are following a similar experience like you have with Azure Functions, in that if you create a new Logic app, on the portal, you will be able to continue editing it from the portal. But if you create it and deploy it from VS Code, either directly or through GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps, you will not have the ability to edit it in the portal, so that it prevents your implementation from getting out of sync. Now, we're also looking into more DevOps integrations to provide you a seamless experience. And Beck, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about things that we're looking into.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming from as a Logic App fan myself, we're keen to look into the end-to-end DevOps process. From actually, deving and testing your Logic apps from a local environment, all the way to seamlessly creating that CI/CD pipeline around your Logic apps and deploying to Azure. We're trying to make it as frictionless as possible, so appreciate anyone's feedback and what they'd like to see through this.
Cool. There's one question on application map for Logic App Insights. John or Divya, do you want to take this one?
I can take this one, yes. So as we mentioned, we are working on enabling App Insights capabilities, and application map is definitely top on that list. So yes, it is coming pretty soon.
Perfect. Sounds good. Next question we have, is there a way to look into for eaches as they run instead of having to wait for the workflow to complete? We're actually doing quite a few improvements for each loops and do until loops. One of the thing is obviously to enable the backend to give you results as they run, so you can see iterations that have completed. But we're also looking into some visual improvements to loops to help you better investigate and debug what is going on. Xiaowei, I don't know if you want to mention briefly on things that we're looking into for each, and I think we're also covering it in the user study that's up and coming.
Yes, so we want to provide a better overview for all of your runs, and then for you to easier navigate to each one of the runs that you want to investigate. So if you are interested to know like what that idea is, and you want to provide your feedback, let us know like what you are looking for in that scenario. Please join the user study that is coming up.
Perfect. Let's see what other questions we have. Is there any work around ARM template export actually working with the Office connector? I need to create new API connection most of the time. Yeah, it's something that we're looking into. I actually wrote a blog that I will post in the chat for you to reference on how you can get exactly the ARM template with all the parameters that you need to create API connection for any connector, not just Office 365. Now, the challenge that you will always have with OAuth connector is the authentication after creation of such resource. What I often recommend people is to think about whether they really need to redeploy the connector every time as part of their DevOps pipeline, right? It obviously makes sense to deploy your new Logic App implementations, but API connection is kind of a set and forget that you only have to do it once at the beginning, and unless the configuration or the credential changes, you really don't have to touch it. So something to think about. And while other answers the question, let me try to find that blog post.
The question about enterprise connector support. Not just yet. I'd be interested to know which enterprise connectors you need. We are working on a new MQ connector on the new runtime, which is an enterprise connector today. So it'd be great if you could let us know which ones you need, because we're prioritizing connectors based on customer feedback, as well as known issues with the current ones.
Right. So I just found the blog post and let me put that into the chat. Cool. We're 40 minutes into the live stream, so let's take a last look at any questions that we may not have get to and see if we can answer them. We seems to be getting more people trickling in towards the later half of the live stream. So for those of you who just joined, hello. All right. So I'm not seeing any new questions coming in. So I guess that is it for the Logic App Live for this month. Again, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate your feedback. And remember to be on the lookout for the BizTalk Migrator live stream that is coming up next week. We'll get that scheduled after this one. And keep providing your feedback. We love to have those so that we can build the product better to fit your need. Um, Try out Logic Apps Preview. It is now available for you to create from the Azure portal, so that is even more easier than using VS Code. So definitely give that a try and let us know your feedback. And with that said, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.